Historic wheat rally in the week in Chicago and also corn and soybeans jumping. Jerry Gidel is going to analyze again, right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. If you're new here, please make sure you subscribe. So, Jerry, we have seen over this week that wheat was reaching the maximum daily levels of range that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange allows. And we are approaching almost the levels of the soybean price.
Definitely, it was one of the more historic weeks ever. Actually, not that there's a lot of people that can they're getting the value of the spot March contracts since they are in delivery, so there's no limits in that. But these we're talking about $4.50 there, and even on the Mays and Julys here from Chicago and Kansas City, they're up 50 and 75 cents. Type limits, and I see that there's some idea that the CME is going to open limits even higher than their 75 cents next week. So it's an interesting situation. The world is also this week because of the resistance of the Ukrainians here, and that giving the idea that this thing could be protracted and could impact the farming and agricultural areas of Ukraine, that all of a sudden the people are getting concerned about the spring plantings from corn and barley and sunflowers and things like that that are also produced in Ukraine, and so it's had quite a ratcheting effect. Wheat and corn have been kind of in tandem. Soybeans were high last week, right when the initial things happened. They've been struggling a little bit, primarily because sunflowers is the only real oil seed that they produce, and it's more of a connection between Ukraine and Europe and their directions, and maybe a little bit into the Asian markets, but on their oil seed, it's not a oil seed that's, it's about the fourth one in the world in importance.
Yes, and what do you think is going to happen now with the export markets and the domestic markets of several countries? I think there is a huge impact related to this situation.
Oh, definitely. Well, uh, the the impact of the lost output in the trade here is because of who's involved with each other there in the wheat markets, and that it's a little more wide open as to who's being impacted by it, and the fact that the tricky the thing about it is, even if we do have a victor, and at this point we all kind of assume that's going to be the Russians as they continue their bombardment of all the things in Ukraine, is the fact that the export facilities might not be cranking up as fast. And also, to some extent, when this all started, a week ago, on Thursday of last week, it turns up that, we just put the sanctions on, it won't be that big a deal, and we're not cutting off the oil, and we're not, this kind of stuff. But the key thing is that the international trade is so highly important on money flows, and utilizing what is called the SWIFT program, which is basically a lot of the world's money machines in your backyard out there to get $100 to go out for the weekend. That's not available, and so all the transactions and ideas going on definitely is there. And on top of it is that how quickly are we going to get those facilities back up and going? And the interesting thing on the wheat side is there's some of that, but the corn, I think, is one of the more unusual ones here. There's been a huge purchase of corn from China. They've had it quite a while in their pocket, and they haven't shipped I'd say somewhere between 7 to 9 million metric tons has not moved on this shipment yet. And so how quickly is that going to happen? There's lots of talk that the Chinese have been moving to other places, and that including, of course, is the U.S. For access, because there's really, at this point, Brazil, us, and Ukraine are really the primary big exporters of corn around the world. Argentina's in that world too, but the Brazilians at this point are just going to have the extra corn that they're going to have from their from their safrinha corn in the north. There's not any excess corn from the south. That got beat up very badly with this dry weather, and things are also slowing down there. So it's really a lot of different innuendos, I should say, and as to what really will play out in this thing, and that's what makes things quite emotional, and also it's prompting people to look at other sources and that type of thing. Right now, at least, the one thing that's been surprising to me that we continue to see the Chinese being purchasers of basically new crop and old crop soybeans under unknown destination in their own name, but but they haven't really stepped up in the corn market. There's been talk that that's been going through their COFCO subsidiary here that has exporting rights in the U.S. I don't know. It's going to be that's going to be a question yet to be determined as to how that scenario is going to work out. But the one thing we are doing is we're substantially expanding the prices here, and that's going to impact our demand domestically here in the U.S. for livestock producers, and to some extent. But I feel like that the USDA's numbers next week will capture some of those changes. But I think a lot of people still have to figure out exactly how this is all going to shake out, and how long is the issues in the Black Sea going to continue in the short term. And I'm not sure that the Russians are going to have a lot of friendly folk underneath them here that could still be an aggravation for them once they potentially have so-called control of Ukraine.
And one aspect that I have not seen so many people talk about in the agricultural world is the competitiveness of the Brazilian corn and soybeans, because the real is one of the benefited currencies in this situation. Compared to most currencies, the Brazilian central bank has reacted against inflation several months earlier than other central banks.
True. I think you're exactly right. One of the bigger factors in this thing in opportunities for wheat, and that is that the the Indian country has been building a substantial stocks of wheat, and they've got a good crop coming. So, and their price points aren't really connected to Chicago's price points, and that. So there potentially could be an advantage for all those Asian connections, and even maybe some Mideast opportunities there too on some sales over the next 3 or 4 months. And so that's why this market's getting back up here, historic highs like they were back in 2008 and the wheat, and then back against the highs here in 2012 and 13 in corn and soybeans, are getting to some price points where for people in the US and even around the world, this is getting very cautionary time here for how high is high in these prices. We talked a little bit about this last week, and I went ahead and made some additional sales in my letter ahead of the USDA's report for next week.
Yes, are you seeing any of the commodities above $20 a bushel?
In the beans, no. We're approaching the spot price in Chicago with some of the things are over $13 in wheat. From the standpoint of $20 No, I haven't seen that. But the one wild thing in this thing is that the timing, the emotions, that kind of stuff in these markets, they can be extremely bullish in one moment, and they can be extremely negative. Sometimes many times it'll go down faster than it goes up. So that's just something for all these everybody out there to understand, that this is a highly unexpected, and that makes it even more of a short-term emotion than when the logic of, and we hope since, really in the 1940s and 50s, that we had somebody decide that they needed to invade his neighbor to slap him around. That isn't the normal way things like this get settled, hopefully in the 21st century.
Yes, and what are you expecting for the report next week?
Well, that's an interesting one. My numbers were ahead of those numbers anticipated for this week, was that we're going to be about 100 million down in carryover stock, because I thought we'd see the U.S. exports being raised by them. The trade is not too far away from that number, with the that would be, they're at 1.48 billion, and I'm at 1.4 billion. And the soybeans, I was looking for about a 50 million decline in carryover stock, combination of an exports and also in the U.S. crush. We increased the U.S. crush last month, but wow, our export sales have been strong, and also with this ethanol, this expanding biodiesel and mostly a renewable diesel situation, we're up there in 90% of our export scenario. So I kind of think we're going to have that increase a little bit. That takes us down to around 275, down 50, and the trades I see is at 280 on the average trade there. Wheat's an interesting one. I looked for about a metric ton adjustment. We're not going to pick up much of this, because our U.S. strong dollar is just not, it's going to be against us. It's going to be people that, that really get squeezed out of other places to buy things, and they turn to the U.S. And basically the South Americans and maybe a few Asian countries will look to us for some additional wheat searches. But we're still at a very, very tight situation on carryover stocks in wheat, and the fact that the U.S. plains still remain very dry at this point. And I know things have changed a little bit in Argentina here this weekend in particular. There's lots of optimism about rains returning in many areas of Argentina. I don't know that it's going to substantially improve their crop. And in some ways, I think it's already deteriorated a little bit more, even from what the USDAs are expecting. And I think that's the interesting thing, that as we go into this thing, I'm still looking for 5 or 6 million decline in South American output on corn, and maybe as high as 7 or 8 million decline in both combining together the Brazilian and Argentine numbers. Even today, we had an update from Sassafras Mercado, one of the more conservative analyst groups down there, that reduced their number down in their carryover stock down to the 125 million metric ton level. I even heard somebody down there had as low as 121. I don't sense we're going to get there, but that's the whole thing about this thing is we still don't have a complete idea where the final numbers are going to be in Brazil and Argentina, and so that just puts us even a little more interesting here on where our supplies are. We could be approaching a near-term high, but at the same time, we still got a lot of support under these markets, even if things might cool off for a little bit. But in the short term, I'm concerned that this thing has maybe got overheated.
All right, sir. Have a great week. Thank you.
Sounds good as always, Luis. And I guess we get buckle up. We see where we're going. We had a buckle up this week. Maybe we'll have a little choppier field ahead of us here in front of Thursday's USDA report.